We all know that Delta Force is one of the Tier 1 units that carry out the most demanding and sophisticated missions that are known to men. When thinking of special black ops-like missions, Delta Force or DevGru come to mind, and with a good reason. These Tier 1 units are responsible for catching some of the most prolific criminals and terrorists in the world. Due to the scarcity of the information about these missions, we've kept it short and as factual as possible. If, however, you are interested in knowing more about this, please read the book Relentless Strike by Sean Naylor, Capturing Ghassan Ameen. He was the number 2 man of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, next to Zarqawi, a man that had eyes and ears everywhere and knew that whenever he let his guard down, it would be the end of him. He had, however, one particular trait that the men from Delta Force could leverage in order to get him. He was a fiery farmer, one who was very ferocious against his farmhands, but he loved farming. In order to grab Ameen, Delta Force had laid out a plan that would cost them a lot of effort and time, but when the time came, would result in no lives cost, hopefully. Earlier, intelligence had pointed out that Ameen owned a farm on the west of Rawah in Iraq, close to Euphrates. It was an unconventional way of doing warfare, but running and gunning would not result in his capture, that was for sure. At the dawn of the day, Captain Doug Taylor and his men would sneak up to the farm, apprehend the real farmhands, and put them in the farmhouse. After that, they dressed up as to blend in and cause no suspicion by the locals. They worked the farm, drove the tractor, and made it seem as if nothing was wrong. After waiting and working the fields, some time went by, but their target would eventually drive up to his land. Ghassan Ameen with his 2 henchmen walking towards the farmhands as if it was just another day. But after greeting in Arabic and being greeted back, he quickly realized that this was his last day on the farm, as the operators showed their weapons and swiftly overpowered the 3 terrorists. It is believed that this worked so well that after apprehending Ameen, they stayed at his farm and worked the fields until more of his henchmen showed up. There were more multiple high-value targets being detained that day, without firing a single shot. The Iraqi Mohawks. General Staley McChrystal had a tough challenge. During the invasion of Iraq, they faced a lot of trouble blending in certain areas, for obvious reasons. Non-native people would stick out like a sore thumb in most of the areas in Iraq during the early stages of the war, and any boots on the ground would immediately result in a warning to warlords or terrorists in those areas blowing their cover. The commander of JSOC gave green light to a more unconventional way of gaining intelligence. Surprisingly, a non-Tier 1 operator had one of the most crucial roles in this uncommon way of human intelligence, and her name was Shannon Kent. Shannon was a United States Navy Senior Chief Petty Officer and cryptologic technician, known for being eager to get hands-on and boots on the ground. Because of her specialized skill set and self-taught human and signals intelligence proficiency, she, together with Delta Force operators, was assigned to form a small, secretive unit of Iraqi intelligence operatives who worked directly with U.S. special operators to go where most Americans couldn't. These native spies performed human intelligence, gathering missions and close target reconnaissance to serve the interest of the U.S. They were known as the Mohawks. It was a risky job, and those caught faced torture and a slow, painful death. But their pride for their country outweighed the consequences. This is where the legend of Kent began. It was 2007, and very few special operations personnel were willing or able to go speak to Iraqis in low visibility areas of the city. So Kent trained herself in human intelligence techniques and went out to develop targets for the task force, already proficient in the language. Much of Kent's work with the Mohawks, like much of her career, was and is classified, and it won't see the light of day for years to come. However, her citation for the Joint Service Commendation Medal, which she received during that deployment, states that she contributed directly to the capture of hundreds of enemy insurgents and severely degraded enemy combat capability. During that time, Tier 1 operations with women on the team were unheard of, as she often tagged along on raids. She did, however, play a critical role in conducting on-target interrogations that led to more targets. It is not an exaggeration to argue that the JSOC task force in country at the time was more successful and lethal as a result of her efforts, and her performance directly resulted in measures that resulted in a larger implementation of females in special operations forces for years to come. Operation Kayla Mueller. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the self-proclaimed leader of the Islamic State, was hiding in a compound in Bashir, Syria. It was the 26th of October in 2019, and Delta Force, together with the Special Activities Center, Rangers, and the 160th SOAR, launched an operation based off a successful intelligence effort in the region, which gave them the position of one of the most sought-after terrorists. Baghdadi used the rubble of al-Qaeda in Iraq as the building blocks for a jihadist superpower in ISIS that at its height controlled more territory, had broader appeal, fielded more fighters, possessed more financial resources, and killed more ruthlessly than al-Qaeda. One thing was clear: this man was a threat to citizens all over the world if not neutralized. Weeks of planning, training, and focus would come down to this moment. The operators boarded their helicopters, with air cover for the attack consisting of armed helicopters, several drones, and fighter planes providing close air support, according to General McKenzie, who commanded the operation. They prepared for multiple children, non-militants at the facility, and sought to minimize deaths. As the heli-borne assault approached Baghdadi's compound, the helicopters reportedly came under fire from 2 locations by non-ISIL militant groups that were outside the target building but in the area of operations. They were swiftly neutralized with 2 airstrikes from supporting helicopters. Delta Force operatives, aided by military working dogs and military robots, landed outside the facility and encircled it, consistently pleading in Arabic for the stronghold's residents to come out quietly. Those who exited the building were searched for weapons and explosives. The civilians were detained and later released by U.S. forces. The group, which included 11 kids, was handled fairly at all times, as stated by the general. 5 ISIL militants within the compound, 4 women and 1 man, presented a threat to the operators and were neutralized after they refused to surrender despite wearing suicide vests. Operators used explosives to breach the compound's walls, believing the main entry was booby-trapped. As U.S. operators continued advancing on the target building, an unmanned drone bombed Baghdadi's compound following the extrication of U.S. forces. Baghdadi escaped into a tunnel network beneath the buildings once Delta was inside wearing a suicide vest and took 2 children with him. By the time he reached a dead end, he had been apprehended by an explosive ordnance disposal military robot and a dog, later identified as a male Belgian Malinois named Conan. He detonated his vest, killing himself and the 2 children and destroying the tunnel. The youngsters slain were thought to be under the age of 12. U.S. forces crawled through the rubble to recover part of Baghdadi's bones, and lab specialists successfully completed DNA profiling and biometrics testing within 15 minutes of his death, establishing Baghdadi's identification. The Baghdadi operation, codenamed Operation Kayla Mueller, was in honor of one of Baghdadi's victims. It did not bring an end to ISIS or the fight on terrorism. However, it was a significant victory in the ongoing battle against jihadist groups. As such, it provides several lessons for the larger battle against terrorism. If you like what we are doing here, consider subscribing and leave a like. Thank you, and we'll see you all in the next video.